So.
I mean, I was tempted. Thank you. Okay. Welcome back to Senate Education. I was going to say Senator Campion Show. Today is Tuesday, January 31st, 3:05. We're joined by Senator Thomas Chittenden, who is going to talk to us a little bit about S34, an act relating to kindergarten enrollment. Senator Chittenden, it is great having you back in Senate Ed, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me back. I would like to, if I may, Chair,
Please, yes.
spend 2 minutes just on S10. Which
You want to start with that?
If I may.
Yes, absolutely.
So I never came to introduce S10 because of scheduling conflicts. I just hope you all know that it's a great bill, and I know Senator Gulick, you signed on to it, and I think it's really worth considering. Fillable stations do a lot at the University of Vermont to reduce water plastic and drive healthy behaviors. And there are also examples of development codes that drive healthier behaviors like bike racks, as well as getting rid of cigarette containers that are all over the place. So I think it's worth considering. It's a great bill. I hope you all take the time to consider it. I do apologize for not having been here that week.
It's no problem at all. If you have any research outlining what you just mentioned, adding bike racks, getting rid of cigarette smoke, that would support it, please forward it to Hayden, and that would be great.
We'll do that.
Okay, great. Now on to S34.
Regarding S34, so I have a prepared statement that I think I'll read for the benefit of anybody tuning in for this, but it should be on the website. And then if there's time and you'd allow me to, I'd like to elaborate upon what's in this written document. Vermont's current statute on kindergarten entrance age is inequitable, inconsistent, out of step with the rest of the country, and is unfair to our children and our parents. Right now in Vermont, a child's zip code determines when they have access to public education. Vermont State Statute Title 16, Chapter 25, Subchapter 1073 allows that a school district may require that students admitted to kindergarten have attained the age of 5 on or before any date between August 31st and January 1st. That's the key piece there. That is abnormal. It is uncommon in this country. And I will refer to some other sources to support that in a moment.
So again, just so we capture this, so allows the school district may require, so what's happening in the rest of the country, basically?
That is summarized in one of the footnote links that you can see from the State Education Agency that based on work that was added to a miscellaneous bill last term, they did a surface scan of both the state as well as other states. On my surface scan, and I will also provide an additional resource afterwards of a couple of different sites, I last saw that only 6 states had this wide opening. There was variations in other clarified policies on when it can be alternative dates, but our statute currently lacks any codified or clarity or consistent considerations for what a municipal district or school district might evaluate whether or not a student is an exception or is otherwise allowed to enroll even if they're born after their set date of September 1st. There's just a lot of ambiguity and inconsistency across the state.
So give us just an example, just
So I'll just jump right into my personal experience. So now I am not here because of my personal experience. I'm here because a constituent reached out to me last spring, and you were on those email threads as well, a constituent that lives in my district. And as I was reading her email, it reminded me of one of the toughest times in my life when I went through this same exact issue over this same exact statute. Since introducing this, 2 legislators have caught me in the hall, and they have related to this circumstance, and I'd be happy to give those names as well. I'm going to read, this is my little story, and I think I have time to do it. I'd like to go back in time 15 years ago when my first daughter was born, my little Samantha Panther. She was expected on August 20th. She came out at 1 a.m. on September 2nd, 25 hours after this arbitrary deadline of September 1st that was established by the local school district of the agency or the school, the area that we lived at the time. My Samantha was 9 pounds, 15 ounces. So she's a big baby. She's been tall. She has been tall ever since then. And there are different studies out there that also show that if you've had kids, oftentimes it's said that there are gender differences in readiness for kindergarten, that often girls are more often than not maturity level, as well as other considerations ready to go. My wife is an educator. She's a 4th grade teacher in Colchester, now 5th grade, and has been for about 20 years. So that was 15 years ago when she was born, 25 hours after that September 1st deadline. 5 years later, we were looking to enroll her in kindergarten. She had attended preschool, she had attended childcare, and it was, I want to say June, maybe May, when we were inquiring to enroll her. She was ready, we thought. She was 4, turning 5 on September 2nd. That's when her birthday was. The school district we were in had a process where we had to put her through and be evaluated, and that was scheduled for, I want to say, mid-June, early June. It was the earliest they could fit us in. You know, the school year gets busy that time of year, so they put it in afterwards. We got the results late July. Then there was an appeal process. We didn't know if our daughter could enroll in public school that literally was across the street from where we lived until about August 3rd. And now if you have kids and you have to put your kids somewhere, that leaves a great deal of uncertainty because we're a two-income household. We both work. So it's not like we have the option to just not put her in childcare or somewhere else. So we were denied. And I made a bit of a news in the area. You can Google it, the Essex Reporter. I was front page about trying to push back on this policy. And I had an appeal process. I went before the school board and I went before the super. It was one of the most stressful times in my life. And in the end, they denied my daughter's enrollment. But since we had to put her somewhere, I went to another school in the area, a private religious school that enrolled her in kindergarten without question. My daughter took kindergarten at a private school, costing me about $13,000. And then after that year, I enrolled her in public school in first grade.
No questions.
No questions. Well, okay. No questions at the school, the private school I enrolled her in. When I went to enroll her, there was initial resistance and they directed me to the superintendent. And we had to meet with the superintendent. She had completed kindergarten. We sat down with him. He was crossing his T's, dotting his I's, and he very, very eloquently said, yes, we will enroll her, because they do that all the time because the entrance age is different across the country than if a child completes kindergarten. Now, I want to say I wasn't blindly trying to force my daughter into first grade. We were actively evaluating her readiness, and we had her assessed by many different people who said, should she be here or not? And everyone we spoke to with objectivity, so that was objectively evaluating her, said, yes, she's ready for first grade. Well, at that time, kindergarten previous to that. So we did, and she is, and she would also be happy to come in and testify if you'd like to talk to Samantha. She's one of the youngest in the grade. Now, I am not here because of my story. I'm here, but during that very stressful time in my life, I called every elected representative I had. I called every senator I had. And I remember just one senator calling me back and spending about 30 minutes talking to me about this. That person served on Senate Education, and he was going back. It was August, so we weren't in session. And he said, I'll have you in and come in and testify. Senator Baruth was extremely gracious back then. I didn't take him up on that because honestly, I got my issue resolved. I was working 2 jobs at the time. My wife was working full time. We had her in kindergarten. There's only so many hours in the day. So I never followed through on trying to advocate to get this policy changed back in 2012. When I got this email from a constituent who I really hope you'll have come in and listen, she wants to be heard as I did as well. She was going through this exact same story this past spring. And now I believe her child is enrolled in kindergarten at a private school to the tune of whatever thousands of dollars. And she is looking to enroll that student, her child, into first grade next year. And she's already getting some resistance and some pushback. So there is something to be said for the ambiguity, lack of clarity, and inconsistency of current Vermont state statute on this piece.
Senator Chin, is part of this who makes the decision about kindergarten readiness, whether it's the parents or the district? Is that because you and your wife felt as though, all right, Samantha's ready to go? Was the school saying she wasn't ready to go, or was it more of just because of an age thing, or were there some tests, or?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
So both the school district policy was September 1st with a process that they put us through a test, and then that test concluded and the school said, we are not going to admit her. During that advocacy, it was revealed through a public records request that they had conducted that test, I want to say 13 times for 13 other, and they had never approved an exception to it. So I believe after my protestations, they actually revised the policy and dropped that testing process and just went to a strict September 1st. If we could rewind time, I'd prefer that. But as long as there's consistency, because it left us in this limbo for 3 months leading up to just 2 or 3 weeks before the start of the semester, when if you've had kids, you have to put them somewhere. And it is very challenging to schedule and know where they're going to go, childcare, private kindergarten, or public kindergarten. What I would like to highlight, and I didn't read the whole statement, but that's certainly there for your reference. The other thing I would just really love for this committee to at least consider is what the administration did produce based on a miscellaneous education bill that passed last session.
We were just talking about how our miscellaneous education bills can get long.
Okay. So if you haven't read this, I definitely encourage you to. It's 7 pages, and it is linked to in this document.
Yeah.
I agree with 2 of the 3 points in this. And I just want to state the administration acknowledges that if the legislature doesn't agree with them, they recommend 2 things.
Okay.
Those 2 things I completely agree with. Okay, so what I don't agree with in this report, and this is on the
What are
first.
the 2 things you agree with?
The 2 things are that if the legislature doesn't agree with the administration, then the agency recommends that the General Assembly codify standardized entrance date of September 1st with allowance for waivers for children whose birthdays fall in the month of September. This would allow school systems to operate in a coherent fashion statewide with supporting individual needs of students born near a cutoff date. So the 2 things are, pick a date. Okay, this 4-month window,
Yeah.
it's unfair for some kids in one community and another kid across an invisible boundary that was drawn 100 years ago to have to spend a whole nother year in childcare just because of the zip code their parents live in. So consistency across the state I see as of great value. The other thing is consistency codifying, have the state provide some guidelines on when those exceptions, if they're going to be made at all, and I think there should be some, and pick some considerations and give the parents some say in it. Because right now it's up, and this might come across negative, and in politics, I want to preface it. Right now is to the whims of the local school boards and superintendents to establish these policies that change as different personalities go. What I disagree in this report is in the 3rd paragraph where the administration says, given the large number of critical and important challenges facing Vermont's education system, kindergarten cutoff dates did not appear to be a high priority for anyone. So that for anyone is where I take issue with. This is hurting families. And I hope, not every family, but I really hope you bring in the constituent who I've connected you with. She indicated she'd like to testify. I can give you the names of other legislators who have reached out with similar concerns and issues with the same exact statute. This is an issue for Vermonters and Vermont families and Vermont kids. Our statute could be better.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I think, there's nothing you're saying that doesn't make sense with regard to just moving forward. We can have the agency in next week. It'd be helpful to hear from a couple more people, constituents and others that you can email to Hayden. You may not hear from everybody, but hear from a couple of folks, and we'll have the agency take us through the study next week as well. Committee questions or comments? Anybody, please, Senator?
Why not just one firm date? What's your reaction to that?
I actually support that. My bill is not crafted as such. I actually spoke to the chair and I said, listen, the report and the administration recommends this. I can go back and keep revising this. And he said you guys didn't have anything to do. So, he said introduce the bill as is to start the conversation, to have this testimony. Because that's in the end, one thing I just hope is that we just draw a light and shine a light on this statute. I would not disagree with having a specific date. I would just also like to couple it with some guidance for any exceptions, which I think there should be some. And I just don't think it should be left to each local education agency.
So would it be appropriate for you to articulate what those exceptions might be, or is that kind of something which the?
We'll pull apart, but are there things that are on your mind right now that you think?
Yeah, so I would say if there is going to be a standardization of assessment, I would say parent inclination. I would say expected arrival date relative to actual date. So my wife was late by 3 weeks, so 25 hours after a deadline. Should that really define whether or not the child can get into public school?
There has to be some research also around boys and girls. And remember, I was held. I started late, but what you're saying is stuff that I've heard that girls tend to be a little bit more ready to go. They held me for years and I still didn't really take off, but they gave it a shot.
I'd never want to mandate that the kids have to be that year either. All I'm saying is parents have no voice right now and they're just not feeling heard, and this policy is just wide open with lots of ambiguity and inconsistency. We could do better.
I appreciate this. Yeah. Senator Pullick, comments or questions?
He's shocked that I have nothing to say.
No, that's
no, it's very interesting, and I've spoken to Senator Chinden about this a little bit. I had the exact opposite experience. My daughter was born September 16th. Quick chat with the principal of the school, and she was able to go to kindergarten. So unfortunately, I have the exact opposite experience. And then the other thing that we had talked about was just, it seems like no matter what date you pick, there will always be some folks who are like, well, my kid was born 2 days before that date. I want, so the date almost seems less important than the agency, kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess that's a discussion we can have when
Yeah.
we look a little bit closer at the bill.
Senator Sheen. Senators.
Pictures.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just hope to hear more conversation on this, and
Yeah.
Samantha Panther would love to come in and testify. I'd like to see her.
You're not raising our taxes down there,
I'm trying not to.
are you? Yeah.
Cheers.
Good to see you.
See
Thank
ya.
you. Ms. St. James, do you want to join us and just take us through the highlights of the bill as it is written?
Sure. Beth
Thank you.
St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. I understand you have S34 as introduced in front of you. Is that correct?
Yes, we have it right in
Yes.
front.
Okay, great. So this bill proposes to amend one statute in Title 16, Section 1073, the definition of legal people and access to school. This statute is found in the hold on one second here. It's found in the attendance and discipline chapter of Title 16. And it defines legal pupil in the state. And you'll see that the language that's struck is current law, and this bill proposes to get rid of it. So it would read, legal pupil means an individual who has attained 5 years of age. That's just some drafting conventions that have been updated that underline and struck language. It doesn't change the law really at all. On or before January 1 next following the beginning of the school year. And then the proposal is to get rid of the allowance for school districts to require that students, in order to be admitted to kindergarten, they have to have attained the age of 5 on or before any date between August 31st and January 1st. That's current law. So this bill is proposing to get rid of that last sentence. And then if you move all the way down to page 2, line 12, the bill is proposing to add new language specific to kindergarten. It reads, the school district may recommend deferred admittance to kindergarten for a student who will attain 5 years of age on or before any date between January 31st and August 31st and January 1, next following the beginning of the school year. Any such recommendation shall be in writing and shall include the reasons for the recommendation, but the school district is prohibited from denying admittance to kindergarten to a student who has attained the 5 years of age on or before January 1, next following the beginning of the school year, if the parent or legal guardian seeks to enroll such a student. So the school district we're still playing with that August 31st to January 1 window. And if the child turns 5 within that window and the school district does not feel it's appropriate for the child to enter kindergarten, they can recommend that the child not enter kindergarten, but that they have to allow a child who turns 5 in that window entrance to kindergarten if their parents want that. And that's it. It would have an effective date right now of July 1, 2023.
So this gives the district an opportunity to say these might be their reservations. They put them in writing, but ultimately if the parents want to move forward based on their experiences, then they move forward. Okay. Committee questions or comments, anything? We'll take testimony on it next week. We'll hear from the agency and others. Senator Bush, what do you think?
My only thought was, what if all of the kindergarten, let's say the school has 3 kindergarten classes and they're all at their max, total
Yeah.
allowable number in the classroom, like let's say it's 25 and they've got 3 kindergarten classes, each with 25 kids. Then what happens? Does that mean they have to hire another teacher and have a 4th section, which could be really financially impactful? Anyway, that would be something that we should probably.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really good question. And I'd like to also, Kate, next week, just get an overview of kindergarten in terms of, I think now a lot of it's moved to full day. I don't know if it's also much of it's still half day. that kind of thing.
And another piece to Senator Chittenden's point about I agree, it is inequitable because it changes across the state. But if, we're talking about universal pre-K, universal childcare, that would take the financial burden potentially off of family.
Yep.
Again, I'm just throwing
Yeah, no.
spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, if universal pre-K or universal childcare were to move forward, it would change the landscape for sure. But there seems to me like there's still enough uncertainty out there. Whether or not-
You still have to answer the question eventually, at what age do they transition to, when do they hit first grade? I mean, at some point, there's got to be some guideline.
Okay, anything else? All right, Hayden, we're good? And you know if we need it? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Ms. St. James. We've got two other topics on the schedule. Proficiency-based learning, we're just going to talk a little bit about with you and then hear from Mike McGrath from the Vermont Principal Association. Then we're going to wrap up the day with universal school meals. I pulled out the part on Act 173, which is the some know as a special education law. We'll do that. We'll find another spot for that. We just ran a little tight today. So would you tell us a little bit? I've become a bit of a skeptic from some of the testimony we heard from teachers last week and others of proficiency-based learning. And I'm just wondering, when did this all start and is it working? I know you necessarily can't tell us whether or not it's working, but when did this all start to transpire? And I believe, do we already have Mike McGrath in the waiting room? Great, then we'll have him join. Mr. McGrath, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. We'll start with our Ledge Council and then hear from you.
Thank you, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm glad you have someone from the field here because there's really nothing in your green books about proficiency-based learning specifically. Proficiency-based learning is defined in the State Board of Education rules in their let's see, their Education Quality Standards Series 2000 rules, and they are tied to the curriculum content that supervisory unions are required to adhere to when they're setting their union-wide curriculum, and also setting local graduation requirements in school districts. These rules went into effect, I believe, in April of 2014. And the rules themselves specifically, as I lost my place, require proficiency-based learning for students entering 7th grade in September 2014, which that would make them the class of 2020. So the goal of the rules were to have students graduating in 2020 who are in 7th grade in September 2014, demonstrating evidence of proficiency in the curriculum outlined in the State Board of Education rules. And so it's really since about 2014 that this requirement has been around. And I believe that it came out of Act 77, which is the Flexible Pathways Act, and created the Flexible Pathways requirement. It amended the high school completion and dual enrollment program so that they look like essentially what they look like today. And again, in Act 77, there's nothing specific in that legislation that says anything about proficiency-based learning shall be in effect on such and such a date. But my understanding is that the concept of proficiency-based learning and the requirement that that's what schools are working towards for 2020 graduates came out of the work everyone did in relation to the requirement of the Flexible Pathways program. And that's really allowing students to experience learning in lots of different ways, and demonstrating proficiency based on different types of evidence. So that shift was kind of propelled by Act 77. And there was a history leading up to Act 77, but the concept of proficiency-based learning is not specifically defined or codified in your green books. It's really a concept that I believe the field will have a lot more knowledge to be able to speak about.
So Ms. St. James, what strikes me as a little strange in all this is that a rule was made, but doesn't that, I mean, there was no legislative directive for that rule, and I see Mr. McGrath raising his hand. I don't know if you want to punt it to him or if you want to take a stab at that.
So I will just say that Act 77 didn't contain any legislative directives there. It's possible that that directive was in a different act and that I just have not, it was not easily tied together. But certainly if Mr. McGrath has the answer.
McGrath, please.
The answer, yeah. I'll start by just saying good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Mike McGrath, and I'm a former school counselor in Enosburg, the middle school principal in Enosburg, and I was the high school principal at Montpelier High School from 2015 to 2019. I've been working for the Vermont Principals Association full-time since the summer of 2019. And I helped to lead Montpelier High School to a proficiency-based system and transcript, really beginning in right when I got there and full implementation in 2017. And I've been working as a consultant as recently as last Friday with districts in just helping them understand what proficiency-based learning is and how to do it well. The specific question that you just raised, Senator Campion, is essentially like the way in which the field has processed that question for the last 10 years now, almost 10 years, is to consider it common law because it's adopted by the State Board of Education in the Educational Quality Standards of 2014, and it does not abut against any laws. It's considered the law of the land in that way. With that said, this you were sort of asking for the history. It's a history that I have lived, I guess. I'm getting to be sort of an old hat around the state, which is surprising for me. But I was there when that EQS was adopted in 2013 and 14. And there was a lot of energy around it at that time. The state consulted with the Great Schools Partnership, and they did some really big initial launches of that work about what it means, how things are different. And then there was a concentrated efforts around the state and districts at varying levels of engagement and support. And, you know, since then, there's been different iterations and including testimony on this very topic almost exactly 3 years ago, which is kind of interesting. I looked up my testimony from 3 years ago in Senate Ed, and it's very similar. And I'm here, you know, for you and with you until 3:50, and I would open it up to what questions people have. Senator Campion, you said that you had some increasing doubts about it, and I think I can fill in any blanks, or I'll do my best anyways.
Yeah, so last week we asked some teachers to join us to understand what was happening in our classrooms and what it's like to be a teacher. And I think at least 2 of the 3 of them said, you know, this isn't really working. They felt as though, you know, this is not, kids aren't. Again, I don't remember for sure. The NEA has their names, and also we have names in our database. But this is a problem. Kids might not be learning what they should be learning. Did we go down the wrong path? We saw some information come out of Maine that Maine is now pulling back and saying, hey, this might need, you know, when we're talking about educating kids for the 21st century, proficiency-based learning, we may have misstepped. So either tell us that we're on the right track, or tell us that we're on the wrong track and let us start to fix any mistakes we've got out there. That's where I am.
Yeah, thanks. We're on the right track. It's not a panacea. I think there
So
may
the right
be.
track, so
Yep.
this is just the right track in order to do what? When we do this, what are we really trying to get kids to be able to do?
It does a few different things. First and foremost, not utilizing proficiency-based learning, or in some places in the country, it's called competency-based learning, or sometimes it's called standards-based learning. But to not root your curriculum and your instruction in a standard would mean that you would be wide open to like, well, what are we learning? What are we aiming for? And so proficiency-based learning at its core is answering the question, what will students learn? And each subject area, from kindergarten through 12th grade, has standards that are adopted, globally, right? The Common Core are national standards. Even if you looked to the IB programs, International Baccalaureate, that those have international standards which the teachers and the schools are building towards throughout that student's experience. And to not have that, really, I don't think anyone would invite that in to just say like, oh yeah, we're not really sure what standards we're going for or what the idea is. I think the confusion has been, at least historically, and by that I mean recent history, the last 5-6 years, really comes into the implementation and also the grading and assessment practices and the reporting of the grading and assessment practices. And that's where there's been a lot of differentiation around the state in the ways in which to do that. And there's been, sometimes there's been confusion in the community or from parents, or that in my experience has been the flashpoint of concern. So it answers the question, what are students learning fundamentally? And the reason that it's often tied with Act 77 is it makes a lot more possible with Act 77 in order to have those flexible pathways. It means that there's the opportunity for schools to partner with community partners and unique opportunities for students. The example that I sometimes use for people to get their head around is that if Hayden, I'll just pick on Hayden in the room there, he's learning a lot working in that office. And there's the opportunity within Act 77 for Hayden to earn credits towards his graduation, doing what he's doing. And the flexibility is there from Act 77, and the learning scaffolding is there because of proficiency-based learning. So he can identify with his school and with his teachers, all right, I'm going to be doing listening, I'm going to be doing writing, and he can pick out some, Common Core standards to work towards with his school that this experience can be a part of, rather than just a traditional classroom or in some other kind of opportunity. It's just a way to illustrate it as an example.
So again, just to push back a little bit, what kids are learning, thinking back to my own report cards, my parents knew geometry was a problem because of the grade that was on there. So how is this actually different? Take geometry, for example. What I'm worried about, Mike, is that as we're sort of here at this table, we're doing something where kids really aren't getting, some kids, the rigor and the knowledge that they need to leave here and be these 21st century citizens. And Senator Pula, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this. I'm sure I'm going to make someone mad, if not lots of people mad. But I am just going to share some observations as someone who was, worked in education for quite a long time, which is that, again, this is from my perspective, and I'm trying not to pass, I don't want to say that the system is right or wrong, and this is just an observation. Our school system, generally speaking, is still very much, it was born out of the Industrial Revolution, right? It's still very much sort of based on that kind of system where you've got Carnegie units and seat time, and you've got, you know, English and math and physics, these subjects that are separated. It's not super flexible. We just heard from Senator Chittenden, who said, you know, there's no flexibility in the state range. So we have a system that doesn't always allow for a lot of, let's say, creativity and flexibility. I'm just, again, I don't want to make some people mad. But
Is
then,
anybody getting mad?
but then we
Not at
try
all.
to take,
Yeah,
then
we're good.
we try to take these ideas that could be good ideas,
Yeah.
like proficiency grading and like personalized learning plans, and we try to like put them on top of this system.
Yeah.
And it is, first of all, it's not easy to do. And second of all, from my experience, it's hard to make it work. It would take so much, it would take such a radical change in the way things work, and so much professional development and almost like a retraining, that it's a hard fit. And I think our reaction, especially as teachers who are overworked and often underpaid, is to like, I just can't do that. So it's not that it's not a good idea, it's just that the system doesn't allow for that kind of fairly radical shift. And that was just, I observed it, and those are sort of some of my observations.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's very helpful. Yeah, you
Makes
can,
sense.
yeah, it does make sense. And Mike, I'll just say, you know, I'm looking at Hayden's, you know, I'm one of the supervisors here. You know, looking at this evaluation, the quarterly evaluation, there's nothing about what you're getting academically from this. It's basically interactions, attitude, that kind of thing, which is all important. But what I'm looking for, you know, what I'm thinking we're looking for is, you know, what is that sort of academic rigor that you might be getting out of this experience?
Yeah, it's a great question, Senator Campion, and of course it depends on the local context, and it depends on, you know, the student's plan and what their goals are, and what's possible in that given system as well. I will say that at Montpelier High School, we had schools around the state and around the country come to see, you know, how we set up our flexible pathways program, including our community-based learning program. And the reason for that is because Montpelier High School had a 25-year head start. They had a program for a long time. And that meant that we had more capacity to build out not just community-based learning programs that might be an elective kind of course, but also to be able to have English teachers, in my example, have dedicated hours to be able to build plans for students to be able to have, you know, the rigorous kind of English credit opportunity, proficiency-based learning credit opportunity that I was describing in my example with Hayden. So that requires, you know, a system to be able to, one, have the capacity financially to be able to have FTEs dedicated to that, and to be able to have enough momentum and capacity to build the system in which those kinds of things can be planned for, evaluated, recorded with community partners, in this case, Senate Ed themselves. So I think there's variance that remains in the field. And I think that there are reasons for that. People were in different starting places and had a different implementation experience. I mentioned the Great Schools Partnership launch that really happened in 2014 and 15, but not all districts were there. And also that investment fell off. And I would just say that if people were interested in doing more around this, there is, some recent attention to it from the Agency of Education, which we are grateful for, in the field with their Portrait of a Graduate work that they just announced this winter, in particular, in consultation again with the Great Schools Partnership. And there's ongoing need for appropriation to be able to implement anything of size and scope well. And your question around rigor, Senator Campion, is I would say that was a complex, there's a complex answer to that. There's a lot of different things that may be impacting, ensuring that students have a rigorous experience, and that all of the factors which you probably all hear on a regular basis are contributing to that, including, the implementation of a proficiency-based system. But I would say that it would be a turn in the wrong direction if we were going to not have high standards in which we were going to work towards.
Is it optional school district to school district? I mean, school to school, it sounds like there's a range of success out there with it because of circumstances, money, etc. Is this something that, one school can do and another school can't, or decides not to?
Well, local control is definitely alive and well in Vermont. And I would offer that it is not optional to do a proficiency-based learning at this point. The way in which it is implemented is a localized decision. And so you may be thinking of a traditional report card as like, look, we all had A's, B's, or C's. And now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the IB schools use 1 through 7. And like, it seems like, where's the consistency? Are people doing things differently? And the answer is they are doing things differently. And actually they always have, right? Because in one teacher's class might have been something totally different in another teacher's class. And an A in one school might have been a 93, and it might have been a 96 at a different school. And so the idea that there was traditionally a lot of consistency in the way in which learning was represented, I would pose is not actually that accurate. And it's about the way in which the learning is communicated and ensuring that is communicated really clearly in a school profile, and in an easy to read transcript, so that whether it's the college receiving it, the university is receiving it, or the parent or guardian at home who's receiving those reports, they can understand whether it's red, white, and blue, 1, 2, 3, 4, or ABC, what that means for their student.
How do you measure your success and this idea's success or failure? Because we did look early on with test scores. We know Vermont schools are in a crisis. We know schools in the United States, based on those scores, are in a crisis. How do you look back and say, hey, can you point to anything that says, hey, this is making things better for these kids?
Yeah, I would say, gaining some testimony around Act 77 successes, and there are plenty of new challenges there all the time, and some opportunities for improvement as always. But I think that there are examples over a decade now of students having really incredible opportunities that are paired with Act 77 and proficiency-based learning. And I think your question is a really good one for us as a state to think about. When we pass laws, what are our measures of success going to be, and how are we going to check in on them on a regular basis? And I think that is a healthy question to be asking on any of our legislation, including this. And the other piece that I could point to more tangibly, Senator Campion, is I'll just tell a quick story. That when we implemented in full in 2017 in Montpelier High School, I announced it to families, and they threw fastballs at me, for a couple hours one night. And then I announced it to the students, and the seniors in the front row had a total meltdown. And, I did my best to reassure them that they were going to be okay. And then I set up a lunch hour, in the science classroom, and said, anyone who has questions, I will answer your questions every day for as long as I need to. So for, a few months, I answered student questions. I sat in lunch. I heard the frustrations. I sat through some tears with students and tried to reassure them as best I could. And then later that year, one of our students was fully accepted into Princeton with a full ride. And shortly thereafter, the questions stopped, kids stopped coming to lunch hour, and there was a lot of calm and reassurance, in the community. And I would say at this point, there are 6-7 years of graduating classes who have been accepted in universities all over the country and beyond. That would be success stories as well. No mention of our CTE centers, which do a great job on this front as well.
Any final questions for Mike at this point? All right, thanks for jumping in. I know having you on reminded me, I think during my first year in this chair, you joined us as well, and we'll look forward to keeping in contact as we kind of dig into this.
Absolutely. I appreciate the chance, and I appreciate the chance to meet with you digitally today. Next time I'll be sure to be there in person, but this affords me the chance to continue to connect with our membership all over the state today. And it was a busy week. So thank you for the chance to join remotely, and I will be at House Ed tomorrow. So I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Great. Thank you very much. Committee, we are now going to move on to universal school meals. We are going to have to start to think about what we do or do not want to do with this. This is, we're going to hear today from some more food service folks, and then tomorrow I think we're going to hear from teachers and others, principals, etc. But just know that, I can't believe it, we're into week 5 here, and we'll have to move a bill in the next couple of weeks if we want to continue this program. So just keep it in mind, no pressure right now, but we're going to first hear from Maureen O'Neill. I want to bring all 3 in for here. Thanks.
Hello.
This is proficiency training is working. I don't know. I feel like some
Criteria sheet.
that Hades criteria. Sure. Yeah, yeah.
I've never seen.
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I just worry. Yeah. Thank you. Maureen, it's great to see you. Brooke, it's great to see you. Thank you both so much for joining us. We have Maureen first, and just want to hear from everyone, just for 5 or 10 minutes, how the Universal School Meals is working in your general region with your work, what you're seeing on the ground. We've heard from other school nutrition experts, food service directors. I've heard about from them in my morning committee in agriculture. And frankly, I've heard some compelling things. I've heard things like visits to the nurse's office are down, stomach aches are down because kids have free breakfast. Hearing that, this is some money is coming from some food's coming from local farms. I think we heard about, a little under $1 million being used by local farms. So just curious what's happening out there, the good, the bad, the ugly. And so Maureen, if you don't mind kicking it off and telling us what you're seeing, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I watched the videos or the testimonies of my colleagues, and everybody has really filled you in well. I am, just so you know, I've been the school food service director here in Southern Vermont since 2009. Before that, I was in the restaurant industry for over 30 years, owning my own and managing many places. And but right now, I got to tell you, I love, love, love feeding kids. And the more we can feed them, the better off we are. I'm going to take a different perspective because we are CEP in Southern Vermont and have been since 2016.
Remind us.
So that's community eligibility provision. And that is where it's kind of set up. That's how Doug was talking to you yesterday about schools had to either be a CEP or provision 1 during this whole cycle that we're doing for universal meals. But we've been feeding our kids for free down here since about 2016. And it's a formula that's based on already incentives that families already have, like SNAP benefits, et cetera. So I actually, when I polled kids and asked them about the meals and eating and stuff, they can't even remember not eating for free, even the high school kids. However, to reiterate, when I go back to nurses and teachers that remember it, they're like, oh, please don't let us ever go back. You know, just reiterating all the things they say about nurses' visits and belly aches and learning. And because we're free, we have a high participation rate for our district. I feed over 3,300 meals a day. We can do breakfast in the classroom at an equitable rate, being that like when you do a breakfast in the classroom and some kids pay and some kids don't, it's kind of hard for that to work out well. And now with breakfast in the classroom, all the kids basically eat. And the teachers love it because they're not like scurrying to the cafeteria and getting all hyped up and trying to take off their clothes. They you know, warm clothes, I'm gonna put it that way, their winter clothes. And they, you know, they get to have a calmer moment with them and their days start better and they know they're being fed and starting it the day off right. I want to, so I am part of a Facebook group called Confessions of Lunch Ladies and Our Lunch Men. And yeah, it's kind of a cool place if you ever want to really catch up on any of this. And the other one is Tips for School Meals at Rock. But there are many, many, many places in the United States that aren't doing the universal meals. And daily, there are people that are screaming about back debt. And it falls on the cafeteria people to collect the back old debt. And so I thought maybe I'd just read you a couple of their kind of things they've been saying. One said, well, it started today, alternate lunch for anyone over $30 negative. And alternate lunches are usually a sack lunch. And that could be, you know, a bag lunch. But then because you can't food shame, a lot of these kids in many of these districts are called to the office and given their sack lunch so that they can bring it into the cafeteria and not be embarrassed by it. Here's one. My family does not qualify for free and reduced, but can't afford lunches. My husband got a raise that literally placed us over by $300. With everything going up, we're always in the hole. We can't afford lunch. Someone says, I miss the free lunches for all the kids. We had more actually coming in and eating. The same kids now are sitting at the table with nothing in front of them now. It makes me sick to see. No kid should ever have to worry about their next meal. And I can read tons of these to you, you know, or you can look at it. It's just really sad. And it's heartbreaking. To me, the school cafeteria is the heart of any school. The cafeteria. It's where the kids, you know, get fed and they get the smiles on their faces, and kids can't function if they don't eat. And we need equity and equality for all. It's a big thing. So I can't, you know, I won't have to deal with it, but my colleagues, if you take away universal meals, they're going back to collecting debt. They're going back to, you know, kids not having the money and what are we going to do? And it's not pretty. It's heartbreaking.
Maureen, have you started work? I think you've been doing this for a long time, but correct me if I'm wrong. The relationship to local farms and local foods, where is that at? Is that something that is part of this equation for all of you?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Maureen, we lost you.
Yeah. We've been working with farms for a long time down here, long before Vermont Incentive. One of the things I have to say about the Vermont Incentive, which is very hard for us tip towns, is I had great relationships with Moses Farm. I had great relationship with Green River Farm in Massachusetts, within 20 miles from Bennington, that I can't now get their product from if I'm going to meet the Vermont Incentive. So in a way, for us that live on borders, it's been a little bit difficult, and we've lost some great relationships with people that are just, you know, 20 minutes away from us. But
that's important for us to know. Thanks for sharing that. So right over the border, Moses, you can't.
Green River Paradise.
Okay. Okay. Helpful.
So yeah, I think it is important to do it. We have done, I heard someone yesterday saying about having the farmers come in, because we've been doing it. You know, I've had a farm to school person, you know, off and on over the years. I have brought in farmers to talk to the kids.
Great.
Really do try to get back to our economy. Summertime, we really can use a lot of the veggies in the program, you know, because we're feeding, that's when we grow them in Vermont. But we're lucky we have a school garden in our district that we get a lot from. So,
Any questions for Ms. O'Neill? Anything at this point? Maureen, you're getting to be legendary status. We mentioned you last week in ag, and everybody in the committee, I think, or the witnesses all know you. So keep up the great work. We really, really appreciate it. Yeah, really appreciate it. And feel free to stay on.
okay, I can't get dinner. I am gonna listen. That's why I couldn't come up, but we're,
No problem at all. Let's see. Cheryl, I have some written testimony from you, yeah, that I'll pass around. Okay, we don't see Cheryl. Brooke. Brooke, I also have some written testimony from you, which I will now also pass around. Okay, Brooke, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining us.
Right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts with you today. I'm a 24-year veteran educator and the Slate Valley Superintendent of Schools. And for the record, that serves the towns of Fairhaven, Castleton, Benson, Orwell, West Haven, and Hubbardton, and Addison and Rutland counties. We have approximately 5 schools, and not approximately 5 schools, we do have 5 schools and 1,300 students. Our free and reduced lunch rates range from 35% to 70%. In all of those schools, our district average is around 45%. After years of careful consideration and debate, the Slate Valley Board decided to start offering universal meals for all of our children within Slate Valley, beginning in the 2019-20 school year, so pre-pandemic. And that was through a combination of community eligibility and provision 2, depending on the status of the school. At the time, we budgeted an additional $200,000 in our local budget to support this because there was a cost to us, being that the majority of our schools were provision 2 and not community eligible. However, due to the pandemic, we did not actually have to expend that money in our local budget due to an increase in the rate of reimbursement we were receiving. So the administration advocated for, and the school board agreed to the adoption of the universal meals for all for the following reasons. We had a significant number of students with mounting student meal debt throughout the district, and parents that were not in a position to pay the debt despite our best efforts. Either they just missed the eligibility mark, or they just did not feel comfortable filling out the paperwork. Families that may have qualified for free and reduced lunch did not fill out the paperwork due to the perceived stigma. And in the end, the district ended up absorbing thousands of dollars of meal debt for these students. At one time, I believe it was over $10,000. We were seeing a steep decline in the level of participation in the meal program at the high school level due to the stigma attached to, or perceived stigma attached to free and reduced lunch status. And the administration really tried hard to work with families to collect the meal debt or to fill out the paperwork, but it began to damage our relationships with those parents, which negatively impacted our students. And per our school lunch charge policy, we were supposed to give those students a cheese sandwich if they had over $5 worth of lunch debt, which did not feel good for anybody working in the district. And we all know that hungry students can't access their education in the same way that their peers can. So ultimately, the administration and school board felt that all students should have access to high quality, nutritious meals every day. The adoption of the Universal Meals Program is one of our greatest accomplishments, honestly, and something that I'm most proud of. In a recent survey that went out to our family, staff, and community, when we were trying to set priorities for the FY24 budget, their number one concern was the preservation of universal meals throughout our district. Staff overwhelmingly support support it, family support it, and the community supports it. So it was, again, included in our FY24 budget. Since the inception of universal meals in our district, we have seen an increase in students eating breakfast and lunch throughout. We have eliminated the countless hours of trying to collect unpaid debt and process forms. And overall, it has improved the climate and relationships between our schools and family. And most importantly, students are being fed, which undoubtedly adds to the positive learning environment. And just as a little antidote, I was having lunch with some elementary school students today, and they spoke about free meals and said that is one thing that we should never get rid of in our district. So, so that was 5th and 6th graders at Castleton Elementary that I had lunch with today. So.
Thank you, Brooke. Questions for Ms. Olson-Farrell? Anything that's popping up? Questions? Please, Senator Brooke. Yeah.
Could you please repeat the survey results that you shared? Did you share a
Yeah.
survey?
So recently we surveyed all of our parents, staff, and community around the things that were the highest priority for them in going into building our local budget for the next school year. And the number one thing all the groups said was universal meals, the free access to the free lunch and free breakfast, and to make sure that that was included in our upcoming budget.
Thank you.
Brooke, one of the things we've been hearing a little bit, we have these pages that are in the building. They're 8th graders. They help, they're take like 6 or 7 weeks and live up in Montpelier, and they help with legislative work. Some of them say that there's, in some of their schools, Gatorade is sold. They can access some junk food. I suspect, of course, some of that stuff's going to happen in some schools. But can you and maybe Maureen just tell us a little bit about what you've got and what kids may or may not have access to? Because part of this is building lifelong learners, preventing obesity, preventing future health issues.
I mean, Maureen, I'm sure, can certainly speak to that. I would just say that we all have wellness policies, or are required to have wellness policies, and the food that we sell in schools need to meet certain nutritional guidelines.
Have to meet the smart snack guidelines put forth by the USDA.
Maureen, we're having a little problem hearing you.
Can you hear me? So all schools all food sold in school has to meet the smart snack guidelines put forth by the USDA. All items actually have to go through a smart calculator, and you have to have your sheet that they pass. So when you have your administrative review, everything you have meets the guidelines. Now, with that said, there are some things that personally I don't think they meet the guidelines. Like, I don't think like you could sell at the high school a diet iced tea because it doesn't have calories, it doesn't have this or that. I personally don't want to sell that at my high school because I don't think they need it, So, but like those iced beverages are very popular. Some of the low sugar Gatorades, any of the like chips are meet the smart snack. There's certain size, a certain amount of sodium, a certain amount of fat. So nobody, if you're part of the National School Lunch Program, you are not serving food that does not meet these guidelines. Or if you are, you're going to be, when you have your administrative review, you're going to get fined for it or whatever action they want to take.
And I would just say that those are a la carte items that students can buy individually in our district. They're not part of necessarily the free meal.
Yeah, there's
Senator Reed, give your hand up.
I'm just curious about if you could comment on the stigma mitigation efforts, which you, I think, tried to exercise before you adopted the universal meals into your budget. What did you do, and what didn't work? What did work? Just curious.
Yeah, pulling students, I mean, there really wasn't anything that worked well, right? The student was still getting, a cheese sandwich, which was very different from what their peers was receiving. So even if they were receiving that sandwich, out of the cafeteria, I mean, they still were, kids still knew. It's very difficult to do that discreetly. Oftentimes staff would just pay for the student's meal in some cases. That happened a lot because they would feel, sorry for the student in the situation and didn't want them to feel badly. And so we had a lot of this going on. And in some cases also staff let those students charge extra money, which was certainly, against our policy, but it was all out of empathy and compassion and certainly things we were trying to wrestle with, and also reaching out to families and working with them individually on, can we help you fill out the paperwork? Can we, do those types of things? But largely we were still left with thousands of dollars of debt. And it just wasn't worth the cost.
May I also add that even though what was free and reduced and paid, know who's free and reduced and who is paid. So even if they were getting a reimbursable meal, and even though they're putting their numbers into, and there's no like certain color card for free and reduce or whatever, kids know, because the kid with money also, like, we don't allow it anymore that you could buy a second meal or you could buy just the hamburger and not get a reimbursable meal. Well, you knew those were the paid kids. The free kids always had to take the full meal in order to be a reimbursable meal. So no matter what you did, kids, the stigma was always there. And even if you're not getting a sack lunch, they knew you were free or reduced student. And they're, especially in the middle school, the bullying that goes on at middle school and the making fun of it is really hard. And it's a hard age anyways. Once you're in high school, it's kind of like, I don't care, I don't care what, whatever, but it's really hard. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and kids know that you're poor. It's bad.
Senator Hashim.
Thank you. So I wanted to go back to the kids being indebted for their food. I mean, personally, I think it's a little outrageous that there are children who have debt for food in their schools. And I'm just curious, what happens if that kid or the family isn't able to pay that debt, and how much of an impact does that debt actually have on the school's budget? And if you don't have any hard and fast numbers, that's totally fine. Just generally, I'm curious about it.
Generally, the school district pays that debt at the end of the school year to, like, for example, the Abbey Group, who we have a contract with. So we absorb it. I mean, you could essentially, I guess, if you wanted to, take a family to small claims court, but quite frankly, that's not worth the money.
In the mid area, your debt follows you through. When you graduate, you don't get your diploma. You walk and no diploma until your debt is paid. And you can read that in the Facebook posts of mine all over. That's what a lot of people do. Brooks, program is great. We ended up, before, we've been TP for so long now, but a lot of districts won't absorb it, and it follows kids right through till they graduate and they hold back their diploma.
Yes, Senator Weekson.
So I just want to actually respond to Senator Hashim's point. I think I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that so you budgeted 200,000 just as a not a hypothetical, but in one of your schools or in your district, but the debt that you experienced at the end of the session was 20,000. Is that? Yeah. That wasn't the number? Okay. There was some debt. Somebody mentioned a number. It was a debt carried at the end of the year that you just liquidated. And
yeah, I mean, I'd have to get you the hard number, but I believe it was about $10,000.
So there you go. So it's like one debt.
And that first year that we budgeted $200,000 was because we were unsure of exactly how much it would cost us. And so we wanted to make sure we had enough funding to cover it. Going into next year, FY24, we are only budgeting $50,000. So that's our new estimate based on, having done this a while now.
Yes, please.
Just-
So I'm sorry, it was Senator
sorry.
Weeks first.
Oh,
Please, no, Senator Weeks,
just a
please.
very
Or
quick
Williams.
Follow up.
Just a quick follow-up. Do you know of any instances in Vermont where there are families or kids who aren't able to walk, or families that are taken to small claims court over food debt?
I'm not aware of any. We don't do that in our district, and I'm not privy to that occurring elsewhere, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Please, Senator Williams.
So I've actually had a couple of my constituents reach out to me over this. They don't have a problem with people that cannot afford. They really agree with the meals for everybody. But they asked the question, what about giving everybody a card, and the ones that can afford it actually pay for their meals? I know it's an administrative burden, but have you ever tried that? Everybody gets the same card. The people that can't afford it get it for nothing. That takes away the stigma.
Well, I think to Maureen's point earlier, I'm not sure that it does, because that's essentially, we weren't giving a card, but that's essentially what we were doing before. And those who are eligible for free and reduced have to take a certain amount of food. Like they have to take the main meal, they have to take a milk, they have to take a fruit. I mean, Maureen can probably explain it much better than I can. Whereas those who can afford it might only have to buy the hamburger, and they don't have to buy the milk and the apple. And so, right away, based on the fact that the cashier is saying to that kiddo, you must take a complete meal, that child is on a free and reduced lunch rate. So there's no way, according to the federal guidelines, to avoid that. Unless I'm missing something, Maureen.
No, you're doing well, yeah.
I don't get it. If everybody takes the same meal, they use the same card,
They don't take the same.
parents that can afford it.
Maureen, go ahead.
They don't all take the same meal. They don't have to. If you're paying for your food, you don't have to take that reimbursable meal. You could take whatever, you wanted, theoretically. It's the kids that are eating a reimbursable meal, a free reduced meal, that have to take certain components. You have to take 3 of the 5 components in order to make a reimbursable meal. And one of those components has to be a fruit and or vegetable, half a cup of fruit and or vegetable.
Cheryl, yeah, I just want to pull Cheryl into the conversation. Cheryl, is there something that you want to add to this for the next few minutes that you have not heard? You're also, I believe, from the same district perhaps as Brooke. So I don't know if there's something else, just looking at our clock, if you want to take a few minutes and say a few words.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, I'm currently at the Slate Valley district. I was, for 6 years, I worked in Burlington. And then for 13 before that, I was over at Rutland City. So I've seen a lot of this. I actually ran a school store, and in 2014, that's when everything had to change and everything, had to be a certain, all the guidelines changed. So everything had to be more nutritious. And so we actually, I think a lot of the school stores closed because of that. And then also, I was a culinary arts instructor. So we weren't allowed to sell to students because we also had to follow, very strict guidelines, as well as you don't want to be selling food to students. And again, the same thing, right? Some students can buy and some students can't. So I think what I think we're, what I care about mostly is the equity. And I think even if you had students pay for their meals, things change, right? So somebody loses their job and then, okay, now I have a card, but now I'm not paying. And so that's what just bothers me. I worry about how the kids are, it's just one more worry that they have to deal with. And as a teacher, I see a lot of the things they're dealing with already. And to have to not worry about, am I going to have to pay for my meal or not? That's what's important to me. So.
Senator Gulick.
I think I want to just follow up on Senator Williams's question, because I've been asked the same question. Is there a program in between the federally funded free and reduced lunch and universal school meals in Vermont? And if there isn't, can we make one? Because I'm asked the same question. What is this going to do to my property tax amount? And how, why can't the rich kids pay for their own meal? I am in favor of, this program, don't get me wrong, but I am being asked that same question. And I think, is there something in between these two programs that might be possible using technology? You don't even need a card. Maybe everyone just walks in.
Well, we did just, and I'm sorry to interrupt, I just asked Ledge Council to just give us a sense if there are families out there that, because we have heard this a little bit, want to make a donation, want to participate in some way. Are there any legal barriers to somebody writing a check for $500 for a universal school meal, something like that to the school district? And so we'll pull that apart with Ledge Council. I think I've also heard the same thing you've heard, and Senator Gulick is talking about. So that wouldn't necessarily interrupt what you all are doing.
Can I just say that when we became CEP, it was first offered, I think it was in 2015, but you only could do it school by school. And then 2016, I think is when you could do it as a district. We waited to do it by a district because some kids in families, the same family might go to Benel and Molly Stark because they live with one parent or another parent, or they actually get kicked around so much. They might be living in Pownell for a month, then they're in Shasberry for a month, then they're in Bennington for a month, or then they have one kid that goes to an elementary school, the middle school, and the high school. So some could eat for free, some couldn't eat for free, so that's why we waited for the CEP. We could do them all. But at first, that was a question that everybody said, oh, why is that doctor's kid eat for free? Why does that blah, 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 blah? And at the first year, we had a lot of those questions. After that, it was never asked again because of equality, equity, the kids all feeling the same on the same level, the teachers, the calmness that comes in the classroom from being able to do breakfast in the classrooms, the not having to worry about your kids being sick every day. I mean, I know you hear that. We've said it so many times, but it's true. And it's a basic essential like a book. There's no difference between a kid eating every day and having a Chromebook and having a book to read. And that's how we all feel in this world we live in, work in. And hope you guys do too.
So just to clarify, Maureen, our district, it was it had a certain number of students in poverty that allowed you the funding to start universal meals well before, like you said,
Correct.
COVID hit.
40% were over free reduced. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a formula. Yeah.
Brooke, that's the same with you. You're in. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Committee, any final questions for our guests or comments? So please, Senator Hashim.
I gotta go. I got my
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much. Thank you for considering it. We really appreciate it.
Senator Hashim.
Yeah, no, just a final comment. I mean, I've already enthusiastically supported universal school meals, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do that again. One thing that I was thinking about though is, we've been talking about, test scores dropping. We've also been talking about mental health issues in school rising. And, this isn't something that's going to magically fix all of that, but it's definitely one of the basic needs that kids should have if they're going to have successful test scores, if they're going to be in a healthy state of mind while going through school. And again, I'm not naive to think this is going to fix everything, but it is one step that we can take to help the kids.
Senator Williams.
Just one more comment is that I've heard from the superintendents about the school districts that can't get their school budget passed, and it gets defeated 4 times. So I kind of like the idea of everybody gets a card, and everybody takes the same meal. And that wasn't something I solicited. That was somebody from your district that came to me and told me that she didn't support this. She supports universal school meals, but not for the people that can afford it.
And I think if I can just start,
Please.
I think, what you had mentioned earlier about trying to find out what, the people who have the means, what they can do to chip in and, do their part to help out folks with less means. I think that sounds like a great idea. It does also sound though like there's challenges with federal regulations, but if there's ways to work around it, I think it's worthwhile to explore.
Yeah, Beth making that come back and say, hey, it's just not gonna work, but there might be something there. Yeah. Anything else? I know a number of meetings start at 4:30, so I think we'll leave it there. Cheryl and Brooke, thanks very much. Committee, thank you very much. We'll pick
Thank
up.
you.